EcoFlow just dropped some serious power with this new River 3 Plus. But that's not all. With its EB600 extended battery, this is not your grandpappy's power station. We're talking some serious features and some serious juice. So let's break it down. The River 3 Max Plus combines the 286 watt hours of the River 3 Plus with a 572 watt hour EB600 for a total of 858 watt hours. And with up to 220 watts of DC input, you can keep this thing topped off indefinitely with solar panels. EcoFlow sent this power station for this review video, and while no money was exchanged, I do in fact enjoy testing these EcoFlow products, and they don't have any control over anything that I say. So thank you to EcoFlow for adding the River 3 system to my testing lineup. Now let's talk about the River 3 Plus itself. It comes equipped with a 600 watt AC inverter with one outlet in the front and two outlets in the rear. And a common feature that's found on all of EcoFlow's latest power stations is X-Boost mode. That means you can bump the 600 watt AC inverter up to a 1200 watt output for resistive loads. Now keep in mind, X-Boost mode actually changes the voltage so those resistive loads get the amps that they require, but if you have anything like AC compressors, refrigerators, computers, specialized equipment that requires regular power, that's not going to work well for you. So if you don't plan to use resistive loads like water kettles, cooktops, or anything that just draws a massive amount of power, then leave X-Boost mode off. But of course, later in the video, I'm going to be maxing out X-Boost mode with all of my camping appliances to see if I can cook a meal or make some coffee with this power station. The River 3 Plus will top off in just about an hour with a maximum input of 380 watts. And when combined with the EB600, you can pump in just over 500 watts, allowing this thing to recharge in just about 2 hours from empty. Now, quickly running through the remainder of the features of the EcoFlow River 3 Plus is its 126 watt car style outlet, which is perfect for running a mini fridge or any of your other car devices. On top of that, you have two 15 watt USB-A's and one 100 watt USB-C. Now this USB-C cannot be used to recharge the device, but it does put out a pretty consistent 90 to 95 watts into any of your higher or hungrier USB-C devices. Moving over to the EB600, it does have a 140 watt power delivery USB-C, meaning you can pump power into or take power out of this outlet. It has a simple on-off button and then a light to show relative state of charge. Right now, this thing is at about 80%, so it's on its final blinking light. One feature that's been going away lately on a lot of these smaller power stations is, of course, its LED light. Right now, it has an amber mode, it has a bright mode, it has a blinking mode, so this is not your standard SOS mode, and then back to off. And we can see that the fan is on right now, and this thing is pumping in its maximum power. So the fan is running essentially at max speed right now. And while we love to get sound or noise output readings from these power stations, when I stop talking, you will see that the sound meter can barely hear the power station over the ambient noise in my room. And one of the reasons that EcoFlow is able to provide such a quiet power station is that in their latest lineup, they've used gallium nitride or GaN technology. Now, GaN technology allows the electronics inside of the device to be about 30% smaller, and they have much better heat resistance and dissipation characteristics. And this next feature might sound a little strange to point out, but the battery pack inside is IP54 rated. When this thing gets a little bit wet, the battery itself will remain protected from any water intrusion. That's important because lithium iron phosphate batteries and water don't really mix well. However, the power station itself is not or does not have a listed water rating, and it does have these fans and other electronics exposed on the sides, so I'd make every effort possible to not allow this thing to get wet while you're out camping. And this is one of EcoFlow's best uninterruptible power supplies, especially for loads under that 600 watt threshold. The reason is it has that less than 10 millisecond changeover, meaning that if you have something like a device that needs precise power but doesn't have a standalone battery, that when the AC wall power goes out, this thing will instantaneously transfer over to its internal battery while limiting any potential issues with those devices. And the last feature I want to share before we get into some testing is its Bluetooth or Wi-Fi app. You can change essentially all of the settings inside of the app. You can make this thing so that it never turns off, or that it turns off after 5 minutes when left unattended. You can also change settings like restart the AC outputs when the device powers off. That's important because when you're in a situation where you run out of power and say you're relying on something like solar power, the AC inverter will shut off, and typically these devices will power back up, but the AC inverter won't turn back on. So if you have something like a pump or something like that attached to this, when it starts to get power again, that thing will start to turn back on or run again. It's also useful for things like home refrigerators, where maybe you have this powering your refrigerator during an outage. It runs out of power towards the beginning of the morning, and then as that sun starts to rise, solar power kicks in, and this thing turns back on and keeps your refrigerator at a stable temperature. So that's a perfect overview of this little power station. Let's take it out and do some real world testing in my minivan camper. We're outside in my minivan camper, and I really want to note two things about this River 3 Max Plus. Number one, can it run my microwave? And if it can run my microwave, does it respond okay to that X Boost mode? And then the second thing I want to know is, can I brew a cup of coffee with it using my Keurig coffee maker that I love to use while I'm camping? And to start the microwave test, I'm just going to use this coffee cup with about 8 to 10 ounces of water in it and just let the microwave run for about a minute. If it can handle that, then I assume it can handle pretty much any load. And since I know that this power station is going to use X Boost mode, I'm going to go ahead and monitor the voltage here. We're starting at 118 volts, and as I start the cook time, so it shows that I'm getting about 500 and maybe something watts. The voltage is dropping down. The microwave is honestly really struggling to run, and that is in X Boost mode. So I went ahead and called it quits on the microwave. X Boost mode just isn't gonna power that microwave for me. I think there are some lower powered microwaves out there. However, that's the one that I use. So X Boost mode was not able to run that specific microwave. Let's see if I can get a cup of coffee out of this Keurig coffee maker. And while I've got this thing out here, it's not super heavy. I think it's in the 20 to 25 pound range. And it is able to be carried by that one handle with everything connected. So not bad. The packaging, not bad at all. All right, so same thing. I've got my Keurig coffee maker set up. I've got the power station in X Boost mode. All I've got to do is open it, close it, and hit the button. Now, because the Keurig is a pure resistive load, it is not having any problems pulling that 600 watts. The display shows that we're pulling 600 watts, and you can just barely make out. I'm not sure if you can see that in the screen. We're getting 77 volts out of the power station. So what this means for real world use is, yes, you can brew a cup of coffee. It will probably take maybe twice as long as it would usually take. I should have started a timer on this. I actually don't know how long it takes for the coffee maker to brew. One thing I really want to point out is this is the replacement for the River 2 Pro, and I used that River 2 Pro so much over the last 2 years. I had such an excellent experience with it that I am actually looking forward to using this in my system. As I've gone to larger power stations, I've been able to use higher wattage devices, but I also have a few lower power devices that I'm going to show you now that would make this perfect for a camping setup where you don't want to use a lot of power, but you can still get, you know, things like a hot cup of coffee and even a hot meal. I want to note that I used about 4% of the EcoFlow's battery to brew that cup of coffee. So for me, that is not a bad cost for that cup of coffee. And what that means is I would consider using this Keurig coffee maker with this EcoFlow River 3. And then I'll show you a couple of items in a minute here that are also perfect for this size device. So we're back in the studio with two of my favorite low power electric cookers. I've got it plugged in here, and it only pulls, if I remember correctly, about 550 watts in its maximum mode. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in drink mode. In drink mode, what it does is heat whatever you're heating up to a boil, and then it stops boiling. So this is perfect for making anything that you really just need to heat up quickly and then mix. If I move it over to eat mode, it will essentially boil until I stop using the boil function. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and use that drink mode. The wattage shot straight up to about 469 watts. The voltage is holding steady at about 118 volts. I did start this test at 91%, and I'm gonna let this cook for a few minutes, and then I'll show you when the water starts to boil. Now, if you've watched my channel for a while, you would have seen me using these exact two devices with the River 2 Pro. And I honestly think for the size of battery that you have in this power station, that you're really not gonna get a much larger AC inverter. I can just start to hear the water essentially about to boil. It is steaming just a little bit. And I wanted to point out that the display on the EcoFlow is a really nice display. It has multiple colors. This is actually one of EcoFlow's best displays that I've ever seen. And on top of that, this output voltage at 60 Hertz is essentially the same as what I'm getting here. Yes, it's off by about 3 watts, but 3 watts in this case is around less than 1%. Just starting to get that rolling boil here. And any second, because I am getting the rolling boil, this Stoke Voltaics Joule electric kettle will simply shut itself off. And like I said, this is perfect for, even for me, if I want to cook something like ramen noodles or oats, I just let it boil that one time, and then I let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'm good to go. So I just missed it. It cut off on its own. It's off now. That is absolutely a success with boiling water with that Joule stove. Now let's try out this Nomad cooking system, which can pull up to, I think, about 1,000 watts. And the good thing with this one is it has this little dial, so when I hit go, it starts off at 200 watts. And what I can do now is look at my power station here, which is showing about 233 watts. So I went ahead and just bumped this Stoke Voltaic stove up to its 800 watt setting. So now I've got this Nomad cooking system running at 1,000 watt draw, but on my EcoFlow River 3 Plus Max, I'm pulling 600 watts at 93 volts. And so every bump in wattage does drop the voltage just a little bit. And in my opinion, I could add a larger resistive load, but all that would do is essentially lower the voltage and retain that 600 watt output. While we continue to boil this water, I feel like this system is perfect for somebody that wants an emergency uninterruptible power supply in their home, or maybe for their camping adventures that doesn't have large scale appliances. The two main factors when considering a power station like this is, one, it is very cheap. The price of this is very low relative to a lot of the other power stations out there. And then number two, it is expandable. This EcoFlow River 3 Plus by itself is an excellent standalone device. It has almost all of the same capabilities, except for it does have that limit of 380 watts for AC wall charging. And when you add the EB600, it bumps it up to 650 watts max. This thing is still going strong. It's been a few minutes since I started trying to boil the water. It's quite a bit of water. But if you want to know more about this power station, make sure to check the link in the video description.